Morning, everyone, and a very good evening to two of our panelists who are not in the same time zone as us. I'm Kanchan Satpathy, an architect, lawyer, and founder of Reciprocity. And it's an absolute pleasure to bring to you Reciprocity Alchemy. A little about myself. I've designed my life purpose to nurture a world abundant with grace, expression, and dignity so that we all feel loved and empowered to live our lives to the fullest. And this I do through my expression of building homes and realizing dreams through my design and construction company, that is 4Point India, and empowering entrepreneurs through this fabulous forum of Reciprocity. We are a business forum which is in the business of empowering entrepreneurship, embodying the philosophy of reciprocity through its core pillars of learn, lean, and grow. And Reciprocity Alchemy is one such learning initiative to bring various perspectives from experts on diverse topics to open our minds to new paradigms and knowledge. Alchemy, as the name suggests, is the process of transformation, a transformation or creation of new ideas and thoughts. And it is our endeavor to consistently provide an enriching experience to our audience. This experience will add enriching value in creating alchemy. So guys, the topic today is artificial intelligence. And as I understand, is that this field was confounded on the assumption that the human intelligence, or HI, can be so precisely described that a machine can stimulate it. Is that really true? Can machines be really programmed for emotions, responsibility, ethics, and values? I don't think so, but let's find out. And AI has already become an austere part of our operational lives and is now not just inevitable, but I think it's an unstoppable process. So what is important to understand is what role can AI play responsibly in our lives? And leading us through this discussion and alchemy today are our distinguished panelists from the field of AI. They are joining us today, as mentioned earlier, from across geographical boundaries and time zones to create this alchemy for us. And I'd now like to introduce them. And as I take out your names, say your names, could you just raise your hand so that the others can just have a look at you? Mr. Anish Srivallabh Chivukula. He's the Director of Artificial Intelligence at Adan Corporate. He is joining us from Sydney, Australia. Mr. Aditya Kumar Sinha, Director at Center for Development of Advanced Computing, CDAC. He's joining us from Patna. Mr. Som Dutt, co-founder Resonance Data Management, based out of Gurgaon. And Ms. Sweta Sinha, the Director, Data Science at Ascend Learning USA. She is joining us from US, Kansas. So ladies and gentlemen, this session of Alchemy today will be co-hosted and moderated by my dynamic, charismatic, and extremely inquisitive colleague, Aditya Singh. Aditya, over to you. Please introduce yourself and also guide us through the journey of today's alchemy.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kanchan. And good morning, everyone. And I want to thank Reciprocity Alchemy, first of all, for having such meaningful conversations related to entrepreneurship every month. I'm Aditya, CEO of BrainPan, a member of Reciprocity and the moderator of this session today. I run Expedify.com, a video creation platform for businesses. It's a pleasure today to host this panel discussion on the topic of AI and whether it is a bane or a boon. A very quick introduction into what my perspective towards the topic is, and I'll introduce the panelists right after that. So I grew up watching movies like Terminator, Artificial Intelligence by Steven Spielberg, and 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. Now, I remember watching them on my Pentium 2 MMX processor with 8 GB hard disk and 4 GB of RAM and a graphic card. Now, believe me, that was state of the art at that time. Now, facts can get stranger than fiction, that too real fast. And I feel that's where we are today. Let me start by building a brief context. The year was 1997. On May 11th of the same year, there was a match between a grandmaster by mankind named Garry Kasparov and Deep Blue, a machine. The battle was to find whether a machine can outwit a human. And we all know what happened on that fateful day. Machine intelligence outdid human intelligence. And I reiterate, the year was 1997. More than 2 decades have passed now. And AI has slowly integrated with our lives. From Google, Alexa, Siri, and the less often used Cortana, to the recommendation engines on Netflix and Amazon. Now, there are self-driving cars today to human-like robots. Sophia and Han debating on the future of mankind. It's just been 16 years since I had that Pentium 2 with MMX processor. The magnitude of technological development in 16 years is enormous. I play a video game called Dota 2, where a company called OpenAI managed to create a bot that learned on how to defeat the best human player in the world 99.99% of the times. And to top it all, it learned how to play the game by itself, playing hundreds and thousands of games every minute. A game lasts 45 minutes, and there's no way that we could actually compete with an AI that has so much experience playing the game. Honestly, I feel 90 minutes is too less of a time to have a conversation about the topic of AI, if it's bane or boon to humanity. But we are going to bring you valuable insights on the topic through an esteemed panel in the next 90 minutes. Now, this is going to be memorable, and I'm glad all of us entrepreneurs who are here today going to take some valuable insights from this conversation. This topic will eventually bring us to immediate questions towards opportunities, regulation, laws, privacy, social structures, etc., or towards a Pandora's box of deep philosophical questions that lead to the purpose of human endeavor, consciousness, and the possibility of humans and machines integrating together. We will try to do justice to having a wholesome conversation within a span of 90 minutes. I'm sorry, can you please put yourself on mute, everybody, just so that there is no interruption right now? Yeah. We will try to do justice to having a wholesome conversation within a span of 90 minutes. And at Reciprocity Alchemy, we do things on time. So grab onto your seatbelts because this is going to be a virtual roller coaster ride. What is machine learning, artificial intelligence, general intelligence, singularity? What is the difference? What are different kinds of AI? What does the future of work look like? Are robots going to make humans obsolete? Is that even good or bad? Is AI like Skynet and Terminator series? Also, how can entrepreneurs ride the wave of this new technology? These are some questions I have in my mind for today's conversation. And if you have questions, feel free to use the chat box or raise a hand while we try to spotlight you. And I thank all of our esteemed panelists who are here today. And together we are going to discover what lies today and tomorrow. And most importantly, what's in it for us, the entrepreneurs of today and tomorrow. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panelists. Just some very quick meeting guidelines. Please keep yourself on mute so that there is no interruption during the conversation. And if you have a question, just feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat box. And Aman, our co-moderator, will be happy to bring you on spotlight whenever it's possible. So my first panelist today is Anish Srivalabh Chivukula. Anish, if you could raise your hand so everybody could know who you are.
Hello, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you are audible, Anish. Anish is a technical expert and an analytics executive. He has strong academic research capacities in machine learning. He has developed innovative products with artificial intelligence. He brings thought leadership of technology trends in the enterprise solutions. Anish is a doctor of philosophy in data analytics and machine learning from the University of Technology, Sydney, Australia. And he holds a Master's of Science by Research in Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence from the International Institute of Information Technology, Hyderabad, India. Anish, it's a pleasure to have you today in a panel.
Thank you.
Next, Anish, your introductory remarks will be followed after I introduce all the panelists.
Okay.
Cool. So next up, we have Som. Som, if you could raise your hand so that everybody could know who you are.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. So Som is a co-founder and head of product and engineering at Resonance Data Management, where he is building deep tech solutions for text understanding with applications in abstractive summarization, intent detection, and sentiment mining. Prior to Resonance, Som was chief data scientist at ID5. Som graduated with a PhD in theoretical physics from University of Rochester in New York and has spent the last decade focused on applying machine learning and deep learning to search, information retrieval, natural language processing, and image processing problems across companies. Som was also chief data scientist at Lightbox, a $100 million VC fund where he advised portfolio startups on their AI strategy. Thank you so much, Som, for taking time and being a part of this panel discussion today.
Great to be here, Aditya. Thank you.
Beautiful. Next up, we have Aditya Kumar Sinha. Aditya, if you could raise your hand so that we know who you are.
Visible?
Yep, Aditya, you're visible. Great. So with 26 years of progressive and successful experience in various organizations, Aditya has supervised more than 150 master level thesis works and to his credit, published 25 research papers and 4 patents and delivered lectures on more than 100 workshops and seminars at national and international level. Currently, Aditya is working as director and center, head of one of the R&D unit of Center of Development of Advanced Computing, also known as CDAC, which is a scientific society under the Ministry of Electronics and IT. He has extensive experience working with Ministry of External Affairs, Defense, MHRD, Home Affairs, Minority, Social Justice, and many state governments. Aditya's current learning interest lies in AI, ML, and analytics, neurolinguistic programming, emerging future and change management, society 4.0, and humanities and humanness in the era of technological disruption. It's a pleasure to have you in the panel discussion today, Aditya. Thank you so much for making the time. Great. And finally, our last but not the least, our panelist, Shweta Sinha. Shweta, if you could just raise your hand and say hi so that we... Hey, Shweta. Shweta is an AI evangelist and ML practitioner who helps businesses make evidence-based decisions by gaining insights from data. In her current position as Director of Data Science at Ascend Learning, she provides thought leadership and strategic initiative to the business leaders to create new products and business models. She leads a team of data scientists and data engineers to create and productize data models and build analytics products that improve the learning experience and outcome for healthcare-related edtech organizations. She earned her master's in computer science with major in AI and machine learning from University of Minnesota. And in her spare time, she loves to do abstract painting, hiking, and gardening. It's a pleasure today to have you here, Shweta. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Okay, so now I'm going to open the panel discussion for the introductory remarks, starting with Anish. Anish, if you could share your introductory remarks on the topic of debate today, and what do you think AI as a technology would bring to us?
So the topic given to me was applications of AI. And so we have to look at various domains, areas, industries where it is applicable. And the most common thing which comes to our mind is pictures, videos, text. So that would be computer vision and natural language processing. But then we have new application domains like automatic driving, where deep learning is used, and video games and board games, where neural network can beat humans in some respects of what we consider intelligent. And then the topic given to me was, is it good or bad, boon or bane, to have these kinds of applications? So we can't give a binary answer, but I'm leaning towards bane. So I'll be the devil's advocate here. And one thing which came to my mind related to my research is what is called adversarial perturbations, which is how we craft changes to the data such that these models malfunction. And how and why is it necessary to have robust AI systems to be able to really use these various applications in with pictures, text, cyberspace, physical world. Nowadays, there is also interaction between cyber and physical world. And when we design in theory, in research, when we design the models, we make assumptions about statistical behavior of these models. And then, but when we use it in the real world, there are many other issues which we have to address, which would fall under what we could call human intelligence, which is not there with neural networks or computers or models. So we have to understand what these models do. And we have to have mathematical ways of explaining how they are predicting, giving their outputs, whether the outputs are desired, what is a pattern. And so in machine learning, there's an idea of ground truth. We have to decide what that is. And this requires us to have a theoretical approach involving interdisciplinary subjects such as physics and psychology ideas used to define what is knowledge, what is a pattern, what is being learned. And how are we going to apply this knowledge, these narratives which come up? And here I wanted to discuss about adversarial machine learning, which is there is an agent which is interacting with an algorithm, and we have to consider that agent to teach the algorithm how to learn patterns, especially the unpredictable unknown patterns. What we can call unknown unknowns. So normally algorithms go from known to unknown. But
Right.
what about data which we don't know about? How do we account for that in the training learning of the algorithms? So what is unpredictable has to be quantified in terms of first visualizing the data, then also explaining the predictions of the model, interpreting the operation of the machine learning systems. And all this comes into a systems development kind of systems engineering life cycle, which designers of these systems have to consider. And I thought I'll highlight some examples about these systems. So my interest would be intersection of adversarial machine learning, robust artificial intelligence, and interpretability of machine learning. So if I have time, I wanted to tell you a story about a case study. Do I have time?
Sure. Anish, let me just browse around the panel for the introductory remarks, and we'll just circle back to you very soon for the story that you would want to share, and then kind of take the conversation forward. If that's all right.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. So next up, Aditya, we have Aditya Kumar Sinha. Aditya, would like to hear your opening remarks on the topic of AI, whether it's a boon or boon.
Hi, audible I am?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay. I'll just start from the very basic. Everybody is working with the computers, and we are using these computers for the things to happen very quickly and efficiently. But most of us we don't think computer as an intelligent system. A computer, if you agree that a computer lacks insight, maybe social intelligence, consciousness, so these things are not available with the computers. But this won't be the kind of things in the future, and many changes sooner than we think will come to the picture. Computer scientists today are exploring ways for computers to emulate the humans. Uh, let's take an example. Let's take how the human brain works first. Given sufficient scanning equipment, and with scientists may be able to accurately pinpoint exactly how the brain operates when you perform an intelligent act. Take an example. A scientist could track which neurons fires when you observe a person's facial expressions or read a poem. These findings could then be translated into the complex algorithms or formulas, and that can be understood and processed by the computers. So in couple of decades, these discoveries will give computer scientists the tool to reverse engineer the human brain. And that is, they could build and program a computer that could intimate or can imitate, basically imitate the kind of human brain, and even become conscious. And then we can say that the true artificial intelligence things has arrived. In the future, it might also be happen that your smartphone can be smarter than you. So these are the some of the initial things which we can think about the future. But when you talk about this AI, a lot of confusions are there in the air, basically, regarding the terminologies, how it is being used. In fact, Aditya has mentioned about a lot of terminologies, right from intelligence to singularity and everything he has talked about. So a lot of confusions are there, and it happens in many conversations. Unless I will not understand those terminology, will not be able to understand the true picture of the AI. I just cleared up some of the common ones. Like if you talk about the intelligence, what does it mean? Intelligence is basically the ability to accomplish complex goals, and uh, which is there with as a part of the human being. As a human being, we are actually able to accomplish the complex goal, targets, and those kind of things. We can think and solve a problem. When you talk about the AI, it's basically non-biological intelligence. Sometimes it is called synthetic intelligence. Many words have been used. So these intelligence are built within the machine, okay, and that's why AI it is called the artificial intelligence. There is a term which is very much popular right now. It's called narrow intelligence, and most of the things like narrow AI is basically people are working on in today's applications. This is the ability to accomplish a narrow set of goals, or say one set of goal basically, one goal basically to solve using the AI. Like what Aditya mentioned about this chess game. So play chess is a narrow AI. Or driving a car, autonomous cars. These are the narrow AI, falls under the category of narrow AI. Alexa, taking your things and then what you call it takes your input, speech related input, and then process it to give you back the output. Is a narrow AI. There is a concept that's called general intelligence. When the machines have reached to the ability to accomplish virtually any goal, including learning, then it is called general intelligence. Then there's a term which is very popular. People are started talking about. Still, the reality is very far, but it's called AGI, artificial general intelligence or human level intelligence. It is the ability to accomplish any cognitive task, at least as well as human. So this is the kind of people are trying to achieve that. There's a concept called super intelligence. In fact, where you go beyond general intelligence, then it becomes the super intelligence. Then there's a terminology which is called friendly AI. When super intelligence, the goal of super intelligence system is aligned with the human being, then it is called friendly AI. There is a terminology called cyborg. I don't know how many of you know that it's basically human machine hybrid. There's a Dr. Peter Scott Morgan. He was a scientist and had a problem with the motor neuron disease. So his entire limbs has been replaced by robots, and he is the first complete cyborg. And all those robots are functioned through his mind mapping. So these are the kind of things which is a lot of developments.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introductory remarks, Aditya. And like one of the things that truly I liked about the introduction was that you kind of broke down certain jargons so that every person in the conversation could get a sense of what we're talking about. Things can get very technical very fast over here as well. Cool. So with that, I would like to introduce and bring in Som to share his introductory remarks. Som, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you. And very interesting to hear the insights we heard from Anisha and Aditya. I'll just sort of dive into the topic right away. Bane or boon? I'm biased, maybe, but for me, it's definitely a boon. I think the march of progress cannot be stopped, and I think AI has the capacity to greatly augment our capabilities, and that's how I see it. In the next 10 to 20 years, at least, there are serious issues that are staring at us down the path, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But I'll just focus on the current state right now, and then we can talk about the dangers of the future, right? So in the current state, like I said, it's almost like equipping an individual or a business with a bazooka. It's augmenting your capabilities. It's giving you superhuman powers. And let's deal with some very mundane examples, right? For example, you're in customer service and you're handling a lot of calls a day, and it's the calls span the entire spectrum of stuff. And if an AI, a very smart natural language AI, can figure out exactly in real time what the person on the other end of the line is saying to you and help you get to the information you need, that's an enormously useful thing, and that's augmentation. That is not eliminating the human, right? If, for example, a partially self-driving car can help you park much more easily, that's again an augmentation of your capabilities. And then you go to the more powerful applications. For example, let's say that you're creating a drug for a pharma company, and protein folding is a very hard problem, and even supercomputers don't help you solve it, but a massively powerful neural net is able to help you solve that problem. Again, augmentation. This is the march of progress, folks. It's inexorable. It's not going to stop, and you really can't do anything about it, right? So I think that the boon part of it comes from the fact that look, at the end of the day, it introduces massive efficiencies for companies and economies, which leads to much better productivity, which leads to overall growth for everybody, and in line with the broader goal of pulling billions of people out of poverty, it's absolutely in that directionally going over there. Now, obviously, that's not the whole story. There are serious risks, and one is medium term and one is long term. So I'll talk about the medium term ones, which I think is really serious, and that's the exacerbation of income inequality. Right? If companies can automate everything, right, then what happens to labor? How do people earn salaries? And then how do you have a sustainable model? Now, there are lots of solutions over there. So I think this is not a technology problem. This is a problem that has to be solved with legislation and policy, right? You've got to figure out. We've got to figure out a way that that people who are getting displaced don't suffer. That could be via a universal basic income. That could be via a robot tax, where anything you automate essentially gets taxed, right? Something that Bill Gates proposed, basically, a tax on robots. And a robot doesn't have to be an actual robot. It could be a program, for example, that automates a manual or tedious task. So I think these things are critical. I think this is if you just leave it to the market and you say market forces will take care of it, I think that's a very dangerous road to go down in terms of societal implications. You can't suddenly put billions of people out of work and expect that they'll be fine with it. They will not. Right. So that's the first risk I'm seeing. And the longer term risk, of course, is what Aditya alluded to, which is the singularity, right? Eventually, an artificial general intelligence will emerge. Eventually, computers will become smarter. If you realize that intelligence is a spectrum, okay, then we are only privy to a part of the spectrum. The upper end of the spectrum is completely unexplored. And we may be to those AIs as our dogs are to us. Our dogs really can't understand us, right? Similarly, it could be the same thing. And we have no clue whatsoever what lies at the upper end of the spectrum and how an AGI will treat us. So that's just the high-level overview. I'll pause over there. I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to go deeper, but I wanted to just introduce those issues because I think they're relevant. Thanks, Arvind.
Great. So great opening remarks. And one thing that I really remember out of what you said, that the march of progress can never be stopped.
Absolutely.
And I love how you have a very optimistic view in the coming years, but with some serious concerns as well.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about how to address those concerns also.
Great. Awesome. And finally, Shweta, I'm bringing you on the spotlight now. Time to share your introductory remarks, and very eager to hear what you have to say. The floor is all yours.
So thank you for everyone opinion here, and it was great to listen about their perspective. I do feel that AI is more of a boon as AI is in the current state. I'm not talking about the super intelligence. We are not there yet. So I think I will add a quote here from Andrew Ng, and he's an AI expert, and he's a co-founder of Coursera and Deep Learning. And he said, worrying about AI as evil is same as worrying about overpopulating Mars with humans. We are not there yet. We have not even reached Mars. And so saying that means that if in the current state of mind, AI is more about, as Som also mentioned, about a specific purpose AI. So it is doing certain tasks very efficiently. And in effect, it is actually augmenting humans while humans are in the loop. So majority of the case is like AI is right now making decisions for us. It is helping us make decisions. So human in the loop here. So now it is creating a superhuman, freeing humans' time from dangerous work, from repetitive, monotonous work. So basically having them be more productive, think about what they can do or how they can explore the universe, explore the world, and freeing about all of those things where they can really apply their human intelligence, as I say. So now, as having said that, I see that AI is still a double-edged sword. And if AI, a badly designed AI system, can easily create a devastating impact they can have a devastating impact. And we have all observed what happened to Boeing 737, which is the autopilot aircraft designed by Boeing. And lot of time, now this is a catastrophic thing that we actually observed how AI was devastating. However, AI devastation can be very silent as well. And when I say silent, AI can be very much hurting to a particular society, particular group of people, where the AI devastation is caused by having a bias by the creators of AI, or the bias from inherent data that is being used to train the AI system. So now I'm now leading to the more towards how can we have a like build a beneficial AI system, beneficial to humanity. And now I'm still in the realm of our special purpose AI, which is kind of like a narrow or little bit of deep learning AI, but not into the general purpose AI. So this is getting into the creating the good AI system means we need to create a AI for good. And we are looking into responsible AI. We are looking into the fairness, inclusion, diversity, and equality while we create the AI system. But as human as such are not so fair. If you look into the human nature, they are not they fair. They are always a bias in themselves itself. So now this is a more challenging problem as we go into years down the road. I have no doubt that we can we can achieve a super intelligent AI. Before that, we need to achieve a general purpose AI, which is AGI, which we are calling in general. So to once we are getting there, now it is a time for us to think about how we can actually create a moral AI. So basically aligning the AI system towards the moral value, towards the moral value of humanity. And it's not an easy problem. It's a very challenging problem, but we must do that in order to have this cherish the benefit of this awesome technology in future, and not today, tomorrow, and maybe 40 years down the road in future. So our generation, us and our generation can also cherish it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Shweta, for for your perspective. And yeah, I mean, we are planning to send people to Mars, and thinking about overpopulating Mars is probably the same analogy of probably worrying about all the devastation AI could cause in the human context today. But thank you so much. That was a really interesting perspective laid out by you. And also, I like that you're also an optimistic like me, and you feel it's a a boon as well. Brilliant. So, so I'm going to open the conversation now forward with my first question. And Anish, if you could kind of help me get through this, and also opening it to the other panel members as well. Uh, for entrepreneurs, where do you feel are specific opportunity areas in terms of a reactive AI or a narrow focused AI that could solve specific problems? I'm sure it's being already utilized in different sectors. So if you could help the entrepreneurs who are listening to you today get a sense of where are those opportunity areas open for them.
So one thing is we can automate. What can we automate? We can automate decisions, and we can get data about decisions, and we can build systems which decide. Now, what is a decision? There is some kind of judgment involved in decision, but right now, as far as I know, we have some kind of a data attribute which we are trying to predict. That is a decision, but that is a very narrow definition. So that the context of that attribute has to be explored further in terms of systems engineering. So people who are building companies can build systems which use these algorithms and collect data everywhere and try to apply statistics in their business processes and come up with ways to automate these processes using algorithms. And one common example which I have in my notes here is classifiers, which is there is some input. It's like a y equal to f of x type of a function, and we want to learn the f. So x is what we collect from the environment, y is what we want to predict according to some criteria, success criteria, and f is what these models give us automatically. We don't have to tell them equations for the f. So this kind of a model is called a classifier, and there are various kinds of advanced classifiers, regression models, which can be built using machine learning. Now, but how would that come into various parts of a system? And how are these linked in a sequence? And how is the data being processed into something more useful? We have to evaluate all of these things. So I had taken some examples for these classifiers. And then I also had some philosophical idea of mathematical modeling of what is knowledge, what is perception, what is intelligence. So if we can decide all of those things and then find some industry where we can augment the existing data with these algorithms and then increase the efficiencies such as economies of scale, then that will be a starting point. But there are various directions to take this. One is theory. My focus here was mostly theoretical, such as game theory. But we can also think of algorithms, applications, systems, business processes, where all of these fit together in some way, in a system engineering type of a way. And we have to define how we want to do the project management there. How do we want to develop the software platforms? What is the use case for a particular user? What is the end customer viewpoint? And how are we automating all this in terms of one or more algorithms? How does it fit into a development lifecycle? And what are we giving as a product? How do we validate those products? What is the scientific methodology behind these products? Are we just using raw data or is it processed data? What are the machine learning features, statistical assumptions we are making? So if we think in terms of all of these things, we can definitely come up with applications which are innovative and which increase efficiency of existing industries. There are so many industries, like finance, retail, insurance, so many IT service industries which can benefit from the products coming from AI.
Right, great. Thank you so much for your perspective, Anish. And so automating decisions and leading from there and building scalable products. Aditya, bringing you on this, do you think entrepreneurs need to build a tech company to actually use the power of AI to bring value to the world? You're on mute, Aditya. And while answering that, you could also touch upon the opportunities that lie for entrepreneurs across different industries as well.
Right. For the business, one thing I can tell you, like the first thing they have to separate between the hype from reality, basically. And they have to look for the realistic perspective on the AI technologies. I had studied one survey from Harvard side. They have done the survey on 2,000 almost 2,000 organization companies, business companies, and they have identified three major areas in which AI has been implemented till now. The first area is basically robotics and cognitive automation. Sometimes it is called RPA, robotics process automations. It is basically to automate the business processes. Okay, and the second area which they have identified is a cognitive insight. Basically gaining insight through data analysis. Okay, maybe different levels of analytics, perspective, and all those aspects, autonomous analytics, and those kind of things are coming to the picture. So they are getting insight about that, and there some decision making can also be done basically. And then the third perspective, the third area in which they are developing is basically cognitive engagement, engaging with customers and employees through different mediums, different technologies. So these are the three major areas in which the businesses are basically employing the AI for the development of purpose. But whereas in the health domain and other domains, a lot of tech companies are working on, particularly the military, a lot of tech things are happening. Transportation, a lot of tech things are happening. But in general, for the business purpose, these are the three important aspects.
Great. So robotics process automation in terms of automating the processes that could be automated through some kind of AI intervention. Cognitive insight. You specifically mentioned data analytics being driven through AI systems, and cognitive engagement. If you could kind of shed a little light on what cognitive engagement is.
Like chatbot. Chatbot is one very simple example of that is the cognitive engagement basically.
Right.
Chatbot is now becoming more and more intelligent. Even you see the Alexa, day by day, Alexa is becoming more and more intelligent basically. So these are the things which is currently used.
Great, awesome. So bringing in you on the same question, what do you feel are opportunities areas for entrepreneurs? And also, I mean, since you're a tech guy and you are also working with the firm, how do you find people who know AI and can actually help you build some products of value to the world?
Absolutely. Let me just deal with the second problem first, because it's a simpler question to answer, which is that it's quite honestly, it's not a hard skill to pick up, as long as you've got some grounding in computer science and data structures, and you even have an interest in programming, right? That honestly, that's really good enough. I believe every software engineer is capable of becoming a machine learning engineer, and we are marching towards the commoditization of these tools.
Oh, okay.
So they're becoming easier and easier. And today, for example, if you use the Google Cloud tools for AI, you can build classifiers on your own, you can train models on your own, and they have something called AutoML, where you don't even have to tune the models. The AI will tune the model for you, which is, even more powerful. So the ability for newbies to play with this and to accelerate quickly is substantial and very encouraging, right?
Wow.
From an adaptability perspective.
Yeah.
Now, coming back to your original question, which is, how does all this help entrepreneurs? So I believe that in time, every company will become a tech company. It's a controversial statement, but I just think, again, it's just the way things are going, and it's just the directionally the way we're headed. Let me talk. There are lots of examples, and they've been touched upon by Aditya also. But I'll talk about one application, right, which has just emerged in the last 4 months, and which is very exciting. And it's basically a neural network, an algorithm called GPT-3 by the company OpenAI that you just mentioned previously in your call.
Right.
And GPT-3 is already showing some remarkable abilities, which, while not bordering on artificial general intelligence, are leaning towards the side of creativity. Now, we have not seen this before. We have not seen computers actually doing creative stuff before, but GPT-3 essentially, just to set the context for everybody in the audience, GPT-3 is an algorithm which takes a text prompt as input. That prompt could be a sentence or maybe a few words, and it completes the prompt. So people, for example, are already applying GPT-3 extensively in the area of content generation, right?
Okay.
Content generation, as you know, is a massive area of its own. And suddenly you have this AI, which is capable of writing perfectly formed, grammatically correct, and most importantly, sentences which are indistinguishable from something that would be written by a human being, right? And they're using it to write entire stories, and they're using it to write blogs and to generate marketing content and marketing copy and all of those things, right? And of course, GPT-3 is in beta right now, but it will be eventually be released to the entire world. It's a massive model trained on about 500 GB of web data. And, it really brings us back to the question of what is intelligence, right? At the end of the day, how do we learn? We learn from absorbing information from the world around us. GPT-3 has kind of done the same thing. It has been trained on a corpus of massive amounts of data. It has 175 billion parameters. And if you think of those parameters as mirroring the neurons in your brain, then it has learned connections, right? As children and even as adults, what do we learn, essentially? What are patterns? They're essentially connections between the neurons and synapses in our brains, right? So GPT-3 is very powerful. And when I say it generates blogs and stories, it doesn't stop over there, right? GPT-3 is also showing some very startling ability to generate code. So, for example, you describe a problem and it'll actually output a piece of code which will solve that problem.
Wow.
So, looking at some very powerful applications here, and I think from a tech and entrepreneur perspective, I think these are going to be extremely impactful in the years ahead, very soon.
Wow. So a lot of, I would say, mind-boggling information came out when you said, firstly, that you said that every company will eventually become a tech company. And I was trying to find exceptions, like, say, garment manufacturing, for an example. But then a lot of human work could actually be done through
robots. Doing a lot of the work, actually. And today you have companies, for example, one led by Peter Beal at Berkeley, which is actually training robots to do extremely fine-grained movements, right? And if you spot the dog robot from Boston Dynamics, it's creepy. It simulates a real dog. So interesting stuff here.
Wow. And also you mentioned that GPT-3, it has over 1 billion parameters through which it actually
175 billion.
175 billion. That's I cannot even understand how many zeros come in front of 175. Brilliant. And so, like, my content writers are not going to be very happy getting to know about GPT.
Programmers are not going to be very happy. My profession is at risk.
Great. So bringing Shweta into the picture. Shweta, if you could share some opportunity areas in terms of what you feel would be valuable to entrepreneurs, and let's take it from there.
Yeah. So on the AI perspective, I think as we all touched on a little bit, that for any company, AI is the way to go. Without AI, we have seen company dying. We have seen like the blockbusters movie which refused or to kind of like start engaging AI. They have died, and Netflix is the one which people now subscribe to. The whole subscription model they produced, and that was the death of the company who did not accepted AI fast enough, I'll say. They did, but did it later, but they did not accept it fast enough. And I can see that in each of this individual company, whether they are in whatever industry they are in, they must engage AI to be able to stay competitive. So competitive advantage is only because of the AI. If not now, later. Here in US, the things are like trending faster, and we are seeing that the competitors are losing if they do not provide AI based insight or dashboards to their customers. So I do feel that AI is has to be there, otherwise it's the death of the enterprise. However, to to see, like, I'm just trying to see that what how to actually engage in AI. So the companies who have not ever engaged in AI so far, I think there's a process involved, that think a vision. However, start slow, get a handle of the low hanging fruits, I'll say, and start working on that. Have an experiment on those one, and get a gauge of not only your outcome, but also your personal, train your personal, getting your hang on the personal, your tech stack, and whether you create your own tech stack, or whether you actually have rely on the automated. Because right now, if take each of the individual pieces of AI flow, data pipeline, there is a automated data pipeline tech stack there. The automated machine learning, there are numerous tech stack coming up in picture. And now majority of like our even the cloud service providers integrating that automated ML solution into their cloud stack. Then monitoring, model monitoring, which goes into how to keep my model updated continuously, so that there's a continuous learning involved within the model. So that particular part of also tech stack is either we can build in-house, or if we don't have our expertise to build in-house, rather use and rely on the tech stack that is offered by different vendors. So a quick path would be to start with the tech stack which is already available, and slowly have the team built to be able to manage and continue building on top of what you have done so far. So I think that is the way to go when you are trying to ramp up on your AI journey, and that will help you start from the basics and lead and go to the level of AI maturity. So this is something that majority of the companies sometimes fail, because they get so overwhelmed with where to start. They know the value in the AI, but they fail to understand where to start, how to start. Sometimes they call in the consultants. Sometimes the consultant works good. Sometimes the consultants comes, do something, go away. No knowledge sharing, I'll say. And once there's no knowledge sharing, the information is lost. So a balance of consultant and your in-house employees, and you can basically, as we all know, that even the knowledge stack is becoming so easier to actually implement as well, AI.
Right.
So it is easier to create our own talent base within your own company. It is so easy. Any software engineer, any data analyst can easily become a data scientist. So I think a vision is required, a strategy. First of all, I'll say a culture mindset is required, that I will accept the outcome that is coming out from data. I'll trust it. So culture mindset changes is required, and then we'll talk about once this is there, and we are able to as part of like a AI journey. If the AI is able to provide values, show values, that will itself build up a trust on this whole AI journey, and eventually it will progress. Another factor I want to add in, and a lot of companies are still struggling on that one, and that part is productizing the model. So they do a research mode and not able to productize it. So this is something eventually, like, it is from start itself build an AI system with end in mind, that I'm gonna productize it, because without that the value is lost. So you have spent
Right.
all of your time, but value is lost. And other piece is we have to continuously understand that a learning is an evolving process. Your model needs to be updated in a continuous basis. So kind of like I'll go back to the model life cycle management. So this is something that needs to be incorporated, and this itself, building a structure framework itself will create a more value out of your AI setup.
Right. Great, great. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, Shweta, and having a culture mindset of adopting AI. And I think businesses are going to reach a point sometime in future where they have to take a call. Are we going to use this technology, adopt it, and build productized services around the model, as you rightly said, or are we just willing to be obsolete? I mean, I think the choice is pretty obvious right there. Okay, so an open question to all the panelists over here. I mean, AI and ML definitely in today's world of entrepreneurship are the buzzwords, right? New companies that are seeking funding and are creating productized services do have some AI and ML models integrated within their products, right? But more often than not, it just seems to me sometimes that it's just being used as a buzzword, and probably I don't know if there is any kind of a AI or a deep learning or a machine learning algorithm behind the product or the service. So what would be like your first 2 or 3 questions if you encounter an entrepreneur who claims to have some AI systems and models built into their product or service?
So maybe I can take that, Aditya.
Sure,
Just have
sure.
it.
So
So let me tell you from the perspective of the entrepreneur, right?
yeah,
What's the entrepreneur dealing with, especially startup entrepreneurs who have to deal with enormous pressures from investors and show growth at very quick paces.
Yeah.
The temptation is there, and it's not just temptation; it actually ends up happening, which
Yeah.
is that you just do the low-hanging fruit first of all. And maybe what you do in the beginning is you realize that 80% of the problem can be solved with 20% of the effort, right?
Right.
And maybe a heuristic more attached to a very simple kind of AI, very basic training, not even a deep, sophisticated neural net, but maybe just a regression tool essentially, something which fits a curve, right? A model that fits a curve, maybe something as simple as that solves a lot of the problem for you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think as long as you're building something that is easily explainable, and that where you get to very quickly, and you're seeing in the real world that it is achieving the results that you wanted to achieve, right? I think there's no harm in doing that, right? Eventually, if you want to distinguish yourself from the rest of the pack, you're solving a problem which at this point is tractable with those more advanced AI tools, then
Yeah.
of course you should graduate to them. And in terms of either you yourself are technical as a founder, or you basically are hiring technical talent. But if I was evaluating such a system, as you mentioned, how would I find out? It would basically be in terms of understanding. Okay, I know that you're a startup or you're a small, medium-sized company. You don't have the resources to train, for example, these massive models that a Google or a Facebook could do. But are you at least taking the open source versions of those models and leveraging them to the max? And building your own heuristics on top of them to achieve your ends. We know that you can't train those models. It's enormously expensive. Training GPT-3 cost OpenAI about $20 million. Startups and even medium-sized businesses don't have that kind of money, right? But can you stand on the shoulders of giants? Can you take those models and leverage them to your particular business case? And do you even have that roadmap in mind? Maybe you're not there yet, but do you even have that roadmap in mind? That's sort of some of the stuff I would ask if I wanted to like.
Great, great. Thank you so much on this. Aditya, I see you want to share something.
Yeah, I would like to add here. Basically, as an entrepreneur, if you have to start with the AI kind of system, you have to rely on the very simplistic form of the things which is available right now. The 4 things would be required. I'll talk about those things. Like one may be the AI infrastructure, then you have to have AI framework, AI platform, and then on top of that, AI services. Right now, if you talk about AI infrastructure, in a pay and use basis, you have to have a lot of, Som also mentioned about that a lot of infrastructure available, like maybe IBM Cloud Functions or the Google Cloud platforms, Microsoft Azure AI. So all those things are available as an AI infrastructure, which can be used on a pay and use basis. I don't have to create your own infrastructure basically. Then you have to have a framework which is already been available. It's a free frameworks like TensorFlow and develop learning 4J sort of things basically. So these are the torch and all those aspects are basically available to the people to use that framework. Then various machine learning platforms are already available. It's a Google Cloud Machine Learning Engine. Then you have to have IBM Watson. All those things are available to start with. And then we have to have various services also, unlike a lot of APIs, a lot of application has already been developed, and the support system has already been created by the different vendors. And like for vision and image, for the speech and languages, you have to identify those technologies, put it create a use case, and use those technologies and create a solution. So that is actually available. You don't have to invest much on if you at all you want to start with some AI initiative in your organization, you don't have to invest much on that.
Great. So, I mean, if any organization wants to invest in AI and develop some capabilities, be it the infrastructure framework or some ML platforms, and what you're saying, Aditya, is these things are very accessible at a low cost, and organizations can start innovating and experimenting around the same. Great, brilliant. Anish and Shweta, just wanted to kind of probably should have done it a little earlier, but if you could kind of just demystify on different kinds of AI, like we heard and spoke about the narrow focus AI, which is kind of a reactive AI. So like 3 or 4 different kinds of AI, and it would kind of end towards science fiction of some sorts when we go towards, I would say, singularity or AGI or super intelligence. But where we are, what kind of AIs exist today, and how and where, what does the future look like?
Yeah, so I will take this first.
Sure.
So right now we are in the mix of narrow and deep, or like a shallow AI or deep learning or deeper AI. So for majority, before I even go there to AI, for majority of AI starts, first of all, AI starts with your data. And before we even go there, lot of time, I feel that it is important for us to understand the value of the data, and not even doing AI, but understand that the quality of the data should be good enough that you can actually do something on top of that. Because once it goes into AI, it becomes lot of time, it becomes difficult to understand for the end users, for your business users. So I feel that that is the main basic infrastructure around developing any AI system. And for that matter, a kind of visualization tool, BI, business intelligence tool, is the best one. So if you have not done anything, your first bet to go is proceed with the BI tools. And there are a lot, Power BI, Tableau,
Yeah.
and these tools are so easy to actually use right now that you can actually train your own staff in a week time frame. And there are a lot of being in the knowledge sharing era, it is very easy to learn quickly. Now that is from there, the first step would be implementing a narrow AI. So kind of more of like classification or regression problem. And that is your first start, and kind of time series forecasting, not all whole lot of deeper time series, but like the basic ones, which is also traditionally used in forecasting and finance world. And then moving
Shweta,
forward.
sorry to interrupt, for the interest of the audience, if you could kind of just break down the regression problem that we've heard the word again and again, and it might just be a little too jargony for the audience. So if you could just explain with a little more simpler language on what a narrow focus AI is and how it actually solves some problems. I think you're on mute right now. Yeah.
Okay, I will take one example. So like to regression problem, how do we tackle a regression problem? Where do we even see regression problem? And we see, all of us see it everywhere, and see it at least at one place. For example, weather forecast. So I'll take weather forecast as one example, where I'm trying to predict what is the temperature, what is the tomorrow's temperature, what is the temperature for 10 days. And some of the inputs that I'm taking inside is my humidity level, what was the temperature yesterday, and what is the current dew level, and all of like other features that goes inside, and what is the wind condition, all of this, cloudy and all cloudy or not. So we use that, and based on this, what we are predicting is, based on these are the input features, as we say, and then we are predicting the temperature. So now, since we are predicting the continuous variable, that is a regression problem. And here I'm talking about multivariate regression problem. We are adding more than one input
Okay.
and predicting on the temperature. So that's a regression problem. In contrast, if I'm predicting tomorrow it will rain or not, just a binary, rain or no rain.
Not,
So
yeah.
that is our classification problem. Now,
Okay.
all of the classification problem is also converted into chances to rain, or like 90% chance to rain. That is what you also see on your weather dashboard, 90% chance to rain, 10% chance to rain. Your classification problem is converted into probability that this is the chance to rain. These are the one which is kind of goes into the shallow one. Now, when deep learning kind of mimics how your brain works. So your brain works. So basically, the brain has several layers of neurons. So in the simplistic neural network, we have 2 or 3 layers of neurons, and we use that to mimic the human brain. And interestingly, while our brain has several different layers of neuron, what we have observed that you're just using first 2 or 3 layers of neuron, we are able to have almost mimic a human, like in the majority of situations, almost like human memory capability. And that is where the deep learning comes into picture. And deep learning has numerous usage in terms of, like, GPT is one example which is also using deep learning. There's
Right.
deep fake. These are all goes into deep fake, which is like you pose as you can have your own image and behaving as or faked as someone else. So this is like a deep fake, and this
Right.
all is based on the deep learning, which is kind of like creating a very interesting Hollywood stories here.
Right.
So these are like narrow and deep is where we are. But having said that, and then we have also like deep learning, deeply reinforcement learning. And reinforcement learning is where we also learn from, like, this reward based system. If you do it right, you get a reward. If you do it wrong, you are penalized. So reinforcement learning work like that, that just like child learns that if they study, I'm giving them something, free time for doing something. The
Right.
same way reinforcement learning works. So that is another category of reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is one which will be also leading to the self learning, actually. So these
Right.
are the main category, I'll say, broadly defining, like, broad category of AI.
Right. Thank you so much, Shweta. Anish, bringing you onto the conversation. So we kind of got a little bit of an insight into, like narrow reactive systems and also deep learning systems. If you could kind of help us understand some of the real world products and applications that are out there, and kind of rate them on a scale of how narrow they are or how deep they are in terms of AI, so that we could kind of bust the myth around that.
Yeah, so people talk about deep neural networks, but there have been neural networks for a long time, like 50 years, 100 years. And we should first understand the basic models before making them so-called deep. The deep thing is just new hardware, new trends, which are converging, and we can come up with new technologies. But the theory behind it is the same. It's based on linear algebra, graph theory, probability theory, and so on, this kind of mathematical stuff. In terms of this, I wanted to say, before we get to deep neural networks, we have to understand things like generative and discriminative learning. So that is, if are we trying to predict something, or are we trying to describe something and then use that to infer something? Are we learning the whole data distribution of all the data records which we have, or are we only learning patterns from data samples which we have? So this kind of thing is there in probability theory for a long time, irrespective of whether we use a neural network or a deep neural network or a support vector machine or whatever model. So this kind of meta level model analysis has to be done in terms of mathematical frameworks. And I thought discriminative versus generative is a good framework to start with. And also traditionally we have things like supervised, unsupervised reinforcement learning. This is what you learn in textbooks. But here the general framework would be something like algorithm which learns a particular task with a guarantee in some performance, and guarantees that over some experience in, let's say, time. So this is the general algorithm which we are trying to come up with. And there are various definitions we can give in economics, in computer science, in mathematics, based on this kind of what is this algorithm, what is this performance, what is this task, what is this experience. And I thought I'd mention the probably approximately correct model, which is there in learning theory of these algorithms. It goes into what is the theory of computation underlying these computers. This model is basically kind of a statistical hypothesis testing model where there are various options for us, and we select the one which is best for the given data sample which we have for training the model. And then we hope that it will work good on future data which the model has not seen. And we have ways to account for that future data. There are various names for these data samples. They are called training data, testing data, validation data, and so on. So this kind of statistical, probably approximately correct model is something which we can consider, but this applies only for supervised learning, as far as I know. And generative discriminative learning comes from probability theory, where we have conditional probabilities. That is, we want to predict something given something has happened. Given I'm in Sydney, we want to predict the temperature outside, which will be different from temperature in Bombay. So this kind of tables and probability distributions are analyzed, and this leads us into the generative discriminative type of modeling which I was talking about. Generally, if for example we record this video and we record all the videos like this, and we want to learn the underlying statistical distribution of all the videos, we want to predict how all pixels of all videos change. That is very, very difficult problem. There are no computers which can model that. They get stuck. So what we try to do is the discriminative part, where we say, okay, you predict only some of the videos, whether this video is a technical discussion, this video is a social discussion, what kind of interaction is this. So we kind of guide the model. So that is the discriminative learning, and that leads us into the supervised learning and the statistical type of thing. Mm-hmm. And for the applications, I wanted to mention content moderation. Like, we are generating content here and we are putting it out on the internet. Mm-hmm. And how safe is it for everybody participating in this is unknown right now. And there could be some kind of algorithm moderating this content, learning patterns like classification patterns from, or regression patterns from, large corpus of text or video or audio or image. Right. And then annotate that text for what is of interest and what is not of interest, what is agreeable and disagreeable. And this involves some kind of legal boundaries or social norms on what human raters provide these models of what is good and bad training data. And we can implement these algorithms such that they are not biased towards particular types of data distributions. And we can avoid biases in how we learn patterns from these models. And then try to apply it to some kind of corpus of videos or comments, and then try to do content moderation automatically.
Right.
So how would, for example, this be modeled into a supervised, unsupervised, or discriminative?
Anish, sorry to interrupt. We're just running a little out of time. Have to ask my next question, but I mean, definitely informative, and thank you so much for sharing.
Just a quick interesting fact I just put here. Like for the deep learning, the algorithm, for running the algorithm, you need to have computational power. And it has been a breakthrough has been achieved at Stanford. They say that this visual processing unit, like GPUs, which is used in the computer, even the laptops are having a GPU, they are best suitable for that can be repurposed for the deep learning algorithms. So for the entrepreneurs, if they want to compute the things, implement deep learning algorithms, they have the laptop they can use for computing those kind of things.
Wow. And I believe also AWS provides certain GPU servers to...
Right. Even at CDAC, we are also providing lot of facilities. In fact, we are building a multi-purpose AI system where this a lot of GPUs can be used and they can be given to the startups to use that, and they can run the application on that particular platform.
Excellent.
One of the most significant spend actually for the startup. They're very expensive.
Yeah, they're very, very expensive. Like one of the best GPUs in the market cost around like more than ₹1,00,000.
Absolutely.
Great. So since we are going out of time, and just wanted to kind of open the Pandora's box over here, right, in terms of the possibilities of AI. So I remember, like, I'm not that old, and I still remember, like, I've seen Microsoft DOS, MS-DOS as an operating system, and today I have an Alexa in my living room. So, I mean, the amount of technological change over the years, the past 2 decades, has been enormous, right? The question, an open question to all the panelists, is what do the next 15, 20 years hold for us? What would be your predictions? And finally, is AI going to kill us all? Is that even a possibility? So yeah, whoever wants to go first, 2 minutes, please, since we are running out of time. And in the last 10 minutes, we'll also be taking Q&As from the audience as well.
I just put 2 quick points. There's a 2 conflicting views which generally emerge out in the AI side. A lot of terms, utopian and dystopian, techno-skeptic kind of things will be coming up. So one from utopian side, Ray Kurzweil, he's basically data science director of the research team in Google. He sees AI as a kind of supreme tool for human to enhance our bodies and mind, allowing us to become smarter and live longer. This is the one view which is coming up, and similarly, the other researchers are also looking up like that. No, AI is a tool that will allow us to finally cure disease and solve problems like global warming. But there are another set of people like leading like Elon Musk is there. Then physicist Stephen Hawking had a view and all, who thinks that AI's potential represent a very serious threat to humanity. For example, an AI program could be asked to solve global warming, and it observes humans are the biggest threat to global warming, and AI will find a solution to wipe out humans at the best option. So that kind of conflicting views are there, but still it's in nascent stage. We don't know how things will move in 10, 20 years. But what is going to happen, that the way technology is accelerating, 5 years down the line, pictures will be much clearer to you. Everybody, it will be like people will start feeling that impact of that AI. And everybody, whether you are using the computers or not using the computers, not using the smartphone, not using the smartphone, everybody is getting impacted by the AI effect. Wherever you will be in the deep like countryside, wherever you will be, and that's why there is I'll tell you just why it is so important. There is a global partnership on AI. Basically, India is one of the founding member of a global partnership in AI called GPay. GPay is basically US and China is clearly having the advantageous positions and all, but the other organizations, other countries, they have came together and they have created a GPay structure, and the idea was to have kind of thing like bridge the gap between the theory and the practice on AI. Then you have to have how these leading experts from industry, civil societies can collaborate irrespective of the land where they work, and then there's an important aspect about the data, the privacy, all those aspects are there. So these are the initiative which is going on to control the damage which may cause in the AI, and then new terms have been coined like responsible AIs, data governance. A lot of activities are already on place, and people are taking care of that, and we are very hopeful that things will now not go beyond our hands. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much, Aditya. Som, would like to bring you on the conversation. You mentioned that AI could actually, it's like handling bazookas to businesses, but you also had some serious concerns about inequality and the market forces at that point, the social fabric, and also if you could touch base on singularity and what it is and the dangers it poses.
Absolutely. And like I said, I'm very optimistic in the short term. But in the
Yeah.
long term, I'm seriously concerned. I'd like to just reference something that I read 2-3 years ago. There's a very interesting philosopher, neuroscientist in the West called Sam Harris. Sam Harris had a TED talk where he spoke about the singularity. The singularity being this point where where AGI exceeds the intelligence capacity of a human being. And what he said was that the moment that is reached, the singularity is reached, the machine can evolve in an hour what may have taken us 1,000,000 years to evolve in terms of our brains, in terms of our evolution, right? So Sam Harris made a very interesting point. He said that I'm literally talking to you about the potential destruction of the human race. He said that to the audience, and all of you think it's slightly cool that you'd be wiped out by an AI, right? Because somehow we are not able to process this. We are not able to process the fact that there's an event 30 or 40 or 50 years down the line which could annihilate us all. You know, I don't think people understand, and it's probably a good thing, the risk, the enormous, phenomenal risk, because if intelligence is a spectrum, like I said, and I had mentioned this to you once, that, you know, it's like our attitude towards ants, right? If we encounter an anthill in the middle of a construction ground and we want to build a building, we will annihilate the anthill. We will just destroy it. We won't care, right? So to us, so to an AI rather, we might just be, you know, minor obstacles who are just meant to be removed. And I think we're some time away from that. But you know, it's a terrifying prospect, and I don't see how to avoid it. I think what Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink, which is integrate machines with human brains, and so that we can exercise some level of control over them, or we can, you know, upload our consciousness into the cloud. Even if that's possible, I don't even know what that means, right? But basically, if something like that succeeds, that is our only potential salvation. Because if it doesn't, in that sense, you could say that Neuralink is probably one of the most important companies in the world right now, and most people don't realize it. You know, because if you just let this continue, and you don't, and what will you do to intervene also, right? You really can't intervene, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, the march of progress is inexorable. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it. China will do it, Russia will do it, right?
Right.
So we are going down that track. This event is going to happen. Whether it takes 30 years or 80 years, it will happen, right? And as Stephen Hawking said, as Musk said, it is potentially an extinction level event. And we've just got to be cognizant of it. Like I said, short term, yeah, very optimistic. Long term,
Right.
the dangers are formidable.
Right. So, I mean, it reminds me of a quote, you know, if you cannot control them, join them at the end of the day. And that
Yeah,
could
that's
possibly
exactly,
be
I think,
the
what
only
Musk is
solution.
thinking of, because Musk, I
Yeah.
think, understands the scope of the danger, right? It's enormous.
Yeah, absolutely. Shweta, I want to bring you on the conversation. I heard you mention certain moral and ethical problems that could come up in the future in terms of how AI interprets it. And what do you think is the solution? I mean, is there a way we could build like an Isaac Asimov's foundation series, the three cardinal rules that every machine should follow, or is it something that is completely out of our hand? And where does morality lie in the entire spectrum?
Yeah, so I would like, first of all, like I would pick up on one of the examples that Aditya just shared on how AI can, like, if we give the problem statement that global warming, fix the global warming issue.
Yeah.
Now let's not do that problem. Give the problem that save humans. So make humans healthy. Now we need to understand how AI works first. So AI tries to maximize a benefit or minimize the cost. So if that is the problem, what it will understand that humans get hurt when they go out. Humans get hurt when they are driving. So what they will do is, and being in hospital actually helps them heal. It might be result in a situation where humans are tied to hospital bed, because that is what they see, that it is keeping them healthy. So if that is not even that situation we wanted to happen. However, it is just trying to maximize, to make humans healthier, keep humans healthier. So now, so it is very important for us to first of all identify, if we want, there's no doubt that super AI will not come. The most important aspect is, how can we create a better question or better optimization mechanism for AI to actually work in the overall benefit of the humanity. And some of the things, like, and another point I would also want to add here is, like, there is a European forum, which is built on that penalizes the companies which does not make ethical use of AI. So they have to show how they have built the AI system, how they are like, is there any bias? And there's a lot of framework that has come in pictures of fair learn, fair AI. These are the different framework that has come on top of that to check for the fairness of AI. So all of these frameworks, which is like towards understanding whether the AI system is biased or not, they're coming up. There are laws and regulations people are talking about that to control it. But eventually, it will. I feel that when in broader run, I feel that those are not the right solution. Those are the solution just to kind of like kind of like stopping for like a short-term stopping of something bigger devastation that is going to happen. So in order for this to actually be able to have a build a super AI, which is going to happen, everyone agrees here in this
Right.
panel. I think everyone agrees that's going to happen. And if you look back into from the time of inception of AI, it was around before 1950s. AI came in, AI term was coined, but AI since then has seen several winters, and only when deep learning came in, and that is what is the next step to building a super AI. That is when the AI came in the mainstream. And that
Right.
is what lot of advances start coming in. Now it is time for us to think back, join the group. So all of those folks who think kind of like Elon Musk, who thinks that AI is gonna do us existential damage to humanity, these kind of people who will join their hands and think about creating designing a problem or giving a AI a problem that helps humanity in general.
Right.
And that's not going to kill humanity.
Right.
But this is not something a easy problem. This is something that needs a lot of effort to think about.
Right. So giving constructive problems to AI to solve and kind of leaning from there is the solution, is probably one of the solutions. Anish, bringing you on this perspective, we are running out of time, so a quick 1 minute or 2 minutes on the response, please. What do you think in terms of, and I also heard you initially in your introductory remark that you believe that it's going to be a bane for humanity at some point or the other. Do you think AI, since it's open source, could it be weaponized by humans, and where do you feel the bane part of it is coming from?
Yeah, the problem is what is the claim to truth is going to be questioned. And who should we trust and on what basis and what is evidence, all of these are going to become a problem. Starting with fake content, which is going to come on social media platforms, such as the deep fake technology, where there will be fake video, fake text, uh, looking like the original thing, and we don't know what is real and what is fake on social media. And we can also think of other scenarios. I wanted to tell you the story, but I'll skip it, which is something like a phishing attack, where people will get defrauded, they'll lose money, and this kind of thing is going to happen immediately. Then later on, things like 5G wireless kind of technologies will come, and we can have new kinds of malware infecting these smart devices, such that there will be something like a distributed denial of service in these new technologies. This is also going to come. And then later on, after this, there will be issue of uh, whether truth of audiovisual content is admissible in court of law, and what is evidence which is there in video and what is not evidence, and how do the privileged manipulate this evidence, and how do we counter this in technical social solutions for counters which we can come up with. How can this evidence create violence and instability, uh, this kind of thing. There are some case studies happening now, such as in elections, we see fake data trying to influence public opinion. But then this will become widespread unless we have some kind of mechanisms to control it. So definitely these deep fake data sets can be weaponized. They can be used for disinformation and propaganda, and you will lose trust in institutions such as financial institutions, government institutions, and it can also go till something like a war kind of scenario, where there is some enemy country doing a gamification of a war scenario using mobile phones and all the cyber tech which is there. So as far as I know, we can counter this through trust, through deciding what is trust and coming up with trustworthy AI. And this kind of adversarial machine learning is also relevant here. We have to model what is cyber risk, what is the trust in that risk, and we have to have multiple perspectives to do this, not only computation based, but other technical, social, economic factors should be considered, including legal issues such as ownership and regulation of the data and politics of evidence. So this kind of thing can happen only with some kind of cooperation in society, such as a public-private partnership. And then we'll also see liability risks for these new data sets. So people have to have some kind of safeguard built into regulatory safeguard built into these models and data sets. And and there will be other things related to law enforcement and across countries, within a country, various norms for society, privacy, security. So this kind of thing is going to happen in the medium term.
Right. Okay, so now since we are almost at the end of the meeting and just opening it to question and answer. So if you have a question, audience, just feel free to shoot it in the chat box.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure, Sankalp, please go ahead.
I'm just going to ask a very simple question, panelists. We all touched about the morality behind AI, right? And we all spoke about how AI could lead to a lot of job losses or a lot of challenges for the country. If something like Tesla autonomous driving comes into taking people around the city or for long haul trucks. So do you foresee, and today whatever development is happening in AI is also because of the lack of regulation from the government side, because nobody knows the impact the AI can have on our lives. So do you foresee a lot of regulation coming in and stifling the industry? Because the government will also have a lot of priorities to address over a period of time. And so where do you see the pain points coming in from the government side, and how soon do you see that coming in?
Is this for me?
It's open to the panelists. Who wants to take
I think Aditya would be the most relevant person to kind of answer it, since he's
I tell you that like a lot of not only the only single government will not see. First, the impact of AI is not limited to a country or the state or the person. It is a basically it's distributed across the world. Okay, so one thing which is coming up here is basically very important. We have missed out that point in discussions is about geopolitical imbalance when AI will actually come into the scene. Basically, right now, mostly the things are happening in US and China, and then there's a prediction that 14 to 30% growth would be there in GDP in these two countries. As he mentioned, Sankalp has talked about the government initiatives and all. If you talk about in the government of India, you can go to the MeitY website and you'll find out a lot of initiative government of India is taking in developing this AI, and basically like if you can see that there's AI portal. Basically, it's talking about the national AI strategy. National AI portals are already been developed, and they're talking about the various sectors as education, agriculture, healthcare, e-commerce, finance, telecommunications, etc. These are the one aspect. Then National AI portal for is a one-stop digital platform for AI related developments in India. Then again, there is a program for responsible AI for youth program. It aimed at imparting education skills in AI to students in government schools. This is the one aspect what we are doing from India side. A lot of countries are joining hands together to discuss about the regulations on the data side, because AI has to flourish. Then we have to have the regulations on the data side, how to share the data, how data can be used. So these are the kind of things which need to be brought in, and agreements should be there throughout the countries. Basically, you can't have just one country. You can make a kind of a system which is not applicable in other country. It's not going to work it out, and that's why there is a global partnership which is going to happen. And they are talking about. I just told about they are talking about responsible AI and framework for responsible AI. And then the data governance, how data can be there. Like one example I'll talk about, that data privacy is going to be a very, very important aspect. So, and analytics is required. When you do the analytics, you actually able to see the data. So how to see the data, encrypted data, how to do analytics on the encrypted data, that is again a kind of a challenge. And that is the research topic people are started, homomorphic encryption kind of things, people are started working on that. So these are the different aspects. Government is putting a lot of focus. Worldwide, people are putting a lot of focus, those in the governmental side. They are also looking for development infrastructure, which is required to develop AI applications for the startups, for the individuals. So that is, they are also focusing on those kind of aspects. So overall, looks to be like, as I'm part of some of these initiatives, it looks that people are caring about that. They are looking forward to create the kind of ecosystem for the for the responsible AI and the good AI, what we are talking about, and it will also help other, and particularly the inclusiveness. They are trying to build the inclusiveness, that if somebody wants to do that without having their own kind of infrastructure available, or not
Right.
or no data, they can actually go ahead and start developing the things.
Aditya, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, we are out of time. Aditya, just a quick 10-second on I think what the question also Sankalp was leaning towards was, when do you think regulations and laws in terms of AI would kick in form of practices or guidelines from the government of India? Any kind of just timeline towards that?
As I mentioned, it's a multi-country thing, and you have to, everybody has to agree upon that. So already initiative is on. GPay is one of the major initiatives that has come into the picture. So I'm very hopeful that the way things are happening, the way discussions are happening, so another couple of years, the risk guidelines will be coming up.
Great.
And that is very hopeful. We are very hopeful that it will going to come up very fast, very soon.
Brilliant. So we are almost out of time. I have time for one more question. Kanchan, yeah.
Yes, so I have a question to Aditya, and Aditya, I'd like you to tell us and leave us all with, one point that you think that any company, any entrepreneur who's wanting to get into the business of AI application, product, research, or anything, what is it that the government, that they can expect from the government to support them? And is there a one point, institution or a forum that we can reach out to, that we will be able to get some kind of a support from the government, whether it is in terms of using the machines or the programs or applications or whatever, like you've been mentioning?
Two things. The first one is the infrastructure. Okay, so government is myself is a part of the initiative where we are creating a supercomputing infrastructure which can support AI initiatives, and 300 petaflop machine we are building basically, which will be made available to the people who are the entrepreneurs who would like to use that capability, high supercomputing facility, for the development of those their applications. This is one aspect. Another is that manpower. There is a program from the government side. It's called Prime Program, which is basically the program which is NASSCOM and the Ministry of Electronics and IT. They have actually contributing. CDAC is a major part in that, and we are trying to create almost 4 lakhs of AI trained, skilled engineers. These are actually it's an upskilling program. Those who are already working in the industry and they would like to shift their focus on this AI side, they can be trained, and there's a mechanism has been created, so they can train and they can also pay if they complete the training successfully. So this is the second initiative what government is putting up. The third initiative is that, as many of you may be aware of that last year government has last year in fact, government has put in almost 8,000 crores for the development of the AI. Okay, and it is having the kind of every activities, support to the individuals, training, then support to the startups, to the entrepreneurs. So all kind of things are available from the government of India side, and those kind of things may be available to all of them. But they need to understand. They can actually see a guideline which is given at the Niti Aayog site. They have a what you call India specific AI framework, how we are going to go ahead with that. So that they can have a look on that, and based on that, they can go to a Mighty site. They can take the facilities which is available to them.
Okay.
So with that, I would like to invite all our panelists to just share the closing remarks in not more than 20 seconds. We are already out of time. So just would want to hear your closing remarks in terms of the discussion and in terms of AI, whether it's a boon or a bane in terms of entrepreneurship. I would like to invite Shweta to share her closing remarks. Shweta, not more than 20 seconds, please.
Yeah. So as of today, I'll still say that I have seen in my own work, and I'm also an ML practitioner, and I have seen in my work, it is already like always a bane, I'll say. Always is advantageous, not bane, it's advantageous. So always a boon, because it generates so much insights that to educators and to the students, that they feel that it has helped them perform better, achieve better. So, and all the things that we have done in our area has already helped them. So for shorter run, I'll say that I'm not worried about AI right now. What I'm worried about, to have creating a better system, because anytime we come back and bring a AI outcome to someone, they always ask why I'm getting this output. So now we have our own responsibility to answer that question. And this is the start of going towards AI for good, where I'm incorporating all those things that we already picked on: responsible AI, fair AI, why I'm giving that outcome, which is actually like knowing more about my outcome and not treating that as a black box. So this is something that will lead us to a better future, even when we are leading towards the super intelligence AI.
Great. Thank you so much, Shweta. Som?
Yeah, hey, thanks. So, like I said, I'm optimistic. In the short term, I enjoy working in AI. I enjoy improving productivity and efficiencies, and I think all is good for now. In the medium term, the problem I see is inequality. We've got to address it. And in the long term, we have a much more serious problem, for which we've hopefully gradually over the years we will start taking more seriously. So that's my position: optimistic in the short term and more cautious in the long. So that's
brilliant. Thank you so much, Som, for the closing remarks. Very well said. Anish, closing remarks from your end.
So build AI systems that humans can trust. Trustable AI adoption from business perspective rather than abstract black box models. Produce regulation against discrimination and profiling. Study how such systems describe fairness, explainability, audit them, preserve privacy, and make them verifiable. I don't think machines have capacity to judgment, wisdom, knowledge. So we should also consider cognition, consciousness models for explainable AI.
Brilliant. Very well. Kind of just bullet points and encompassing a lot of information together in a one holistic closing remark. Thank you so much, Anish. Aditya, your closing remarks on the topic.
Yeah, I just quote one of the longest living scientists from the AI side, Stuart Russell. Everybody has read his book, textbook, Russell and Norvig book. He has recently written a book on human compatible. So he quotes like, the way we currently design AI is fundamentally flawed. We are designing AI to be intelligent, but not necessarily to have humanity in the best interest. If we can successfully control super intelligent AI, we would be able to harness its immense power to advance our civilizations and liberate humanity from enslavements. But if we fail, we are in danger of losing our autonomy as we become increasingly subject to the whims of superior intelligence. So this is the kind of thoughts he has given very recently, and that is the kind of guidelines which you have to follow.
Brilliant. Thank you for the closing remark, all the esteemed panelists. Kanchan, I would invite you to share the vote of thanks with the panelists as well. Kanchan, you're on mute.
Thank you so much for all the panelists for being here, and a special thank you to Anish and Shweta for joining us at your different time zones. Especially Shweta, I know you are in the middle of the night and still as vibrant. You know, when I approached her and I asked her, I said, will it be a fair time? She said, this topic is so close to my heart that I don't mind being here. I'm very intrigued and I'm very inspired by this. So thank you so much, Shweta. It is really inspiring to hear your views and your insights, and to all the other panelists. Aditya, you gave us a fabulous insight of how, being entrepreneurs, we don't realize, but yes, at the government level also, there is so much happening, and you give us so much hope to know that it's not just within our own government, but it's a conglomerate of various countries that are put together that are working towards how AI should be more responsible. And thank you everyone for being such a participative and attentive audience. I just want to close this by saying AI is inevitable. It is a significant part of our lives, knowingly or unknowingly, it is there. And what we need to take care of is that it should be responsible. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for participating in Reciprocity Alchemy. Should you be keen to know more about Reciprocity, we would be glad to extend an invite to you to attend one of our weekly meetings that happens every Monday morning. And today we are giving out 10 free invites for Reciprocity Online for November. Please drop your email ID on the chat to receive your invite. Only the first 10 will receive the free invites. Thank you, everyone. The recording of this session will be on YouTube for your reference. Please access Reciprocity Global on YouTube